So, the Knuckles series is off to a bit of a start, isn't it? But the question is, can it keep the streak going and last more than one issue in keeping my interest alive? At the very least, they don't have to neatly wrap up the story in 3 or 4 issues' time, so yeah, maybe this will keep up the intrigue of the first issue and address some of the flaws. Not off to a good start though, as the cover isn't really as strong as the first, presenting us with a bit of a busy scene, with a transparent Knuckles and Chaotix in the background, a flaming scene below that, and this in the foreground. I get that this is supposed to be a bit of a sad scene with Steppenwolf standing over the body of his father, Edmund, but there are a couple of problems with it. First, I bet you wouldn't know which characters those were if I hadn't said their names just then, and I didn't even know until I gave the issue a read-through. And 2, that doesn't exactly look like the face of sadness, not even rage. He seems more perturbed that his eyes are leaking, honestly. We open once again on our prerequisite text crawl before the comic opens proper, with Knuckles and the Chaotix being doused with water to wake them up. They've been restrained next to a large encampment being used by these cloaked foes, and Knuckles is ordered to get up and follow them to meet with their leader, Kragok. Inside the tent, Kragok does attempt to be amicable to Knuckles, mostly wanting to discuss things with him first, even allowing his guards to unshackle him so he can sit comfortably. From there, we cut back to the past, where a colony of ants are having a meeting about the situation with the Echidnas, where they surmise that the lack of precedence for the Guardian keeps him from wielding any real power when it comes to stopping this growing rebellion. The Queen asks the speaker, Christophles, to act as a guide and teacher to the Guardian, and he poofs off to do just that, reappearing next to Edmund, who is reciting the classic Batman origin line when the ant appears to him, telling him that his son is in grave danger. He runs off, not listening to anything else the ant might have to say, grabbing himself a horse to dash off and save both his son and his people. Back in the present, as soon as Knuckles is released from his bonds, he lunges forward, grabbing at Kragok, getting ready to beat him into the ground, but the guards around him grab him and pin him down to the table. Kragok demonstrates some pretty hefty power by knocking Knuckles away before demanding to know where the Chaos Chamber is, and when Knuckles denies him that knowledge, he walks out of the tent and orders his guards to beat Knuckles down. This turns out to be a pretty bad move, as Knuckles is able to easily overpower the 3 guards inside and steals one of their cloaks, giving us a good look at what a typical Legion member looks like. It's rather a creepy design, actually. And then we cut back to the past, where we witness Edmund sneaking up on a couple of cultists who are searching the wreckage for Steppenwolf. He manages to dispatch 2 of them, knocking them out, but fails to notice another 2 sneaking up behind him. And with a dramatic zoom in on a laser shot and his glasses shattering to the ground, Edmund is killed. And yeah, actual death this time, no playing around. We even see Steppenwolf, who was conveniently knocked out behind some oil drums during the whole thing, cradling his dead father, though his body looks oddly pristine. Running theme in the series, I suppose. The ant reappears, offering him some words of encouragement, telling him that there will be time to grieve later. There's something more important to do now. Dude, the kid just lost his father. That is probably the worst thing that you could say to him. And then we cut back to the present, where the Chaotix are trying their best to whittle away the time while waiting for Knuckles, when they see one of the cloaked figures knocking out the guards around them. It's revealed to be Knuckles, enacting a jailbreak, and in need of a diversion, they take a liking to a nearby tank. We cut over to Locke, watching all of this on his state-of-the-art gaming setup, who has grown incredibly hopeful for his son, just as Archimedes appears next to him. Archie isn't exactly happy with his choice, knowing that Knuckles still needs help, but before the 2 of them could argue the pros and cons of the decision, an alarm starts to blare, making them think that an enemy has entered their base of operations. But as it turns out, it isn't an enemy, but a Thair, and Locke states that he'd rather it be an enemy. Meanwhile, back at the Legion camp, a group of foot soldiers are moving a bunch of explosive barrels around just as an unmanned tank rolls down the hill, crushing a bunch of the robots, impacting the explosives, and probably killing or maiming everyone in the camp as Knuckles and the Chaotix run off, wanting to get some breathing room between themselves and the rest of Kragok's army. And we cut back to Thair and Locke, arguing about him being there, Locke accusing him of being selfish, but before the argument can go on, Archie interrupts, saying that if Thair is here, it must be important. and then a visage of the 3 ancient walkers appears behind him as he disappears, saying that Locke should see this as a warning. A warning for what? No idea, because he didn't explain anything before he just up and disappeared. Archie says that he doesn't have time for this, he has to go back and help Knuckles, but Locke asks him to stay, stating that if something big is happening, his wisdom would be put to better use there, rather than assisting the group that's currently fleeing for their life from an armed, technologically advanced cult. And once again, we cut to the past, where we see a training montage of Steppenwolf being prepared for his duties as a guardian, training that his father was never given. No telling how long this takes, but they put him through intense physical, mental, and even spiritual training, culminating in him being able to attune himself to the energies of the Chaos Emerald itself, tapping into its power. That being done, Christophles leads him out into the desert, to a new hidden place, the base of operations for the Guardians, Haven, a place that seems to use a lot of technology for a species that's sworn off tech. And once again, we cut back to the present, where Knuckles has Mighty bring down a massive tree behind them in hopes of slowing their pursuers. And it does, momentarily, as their tanks can't get over the thick tree, but Kragok isn't exactly concerned with keeping the forest in one piece, and so he decides the best course of action is to try to smoke them out, or burn them alive, whichever works. He has the tanks launch incendiary rounds into the forest, setting it ablaze in no time. Knuckles and friends try to keep ahead of the fire, but as they run, there's something heading towards them. A stampede of the forest denizens is heading straight towards them, which includes a few little cameos in there. Hi, Heavy and Bomb! Well, the story certainly got moved forward, but the problems here are consistent with the gripes I had in the first issue. Knuckles and friends' captivity was pretty short-lived, not really helped by the fact that we once again are cutting all over the place. While it didn't feel quite as rapid as the first issue, it was still stretched thin by the fact that we now had a third scene to revisit with Locke, Archy, and Ether. The main story, the Knuckles one, was pretty fine for moving the present story forward, though not a whole lot happened with it this issue. Locke and Archy's story basically just amounted to things are gonna happen, but we aren't even gonna hint at what they are, which was more annoying than anything. Especially since, in this story, it's mostly just an excuse to keep Archy from lending assistance. The past scenes, well, they're building a bit more backstory, but it felt more superfluous this time than it did in the first issue. It also introduces us to the first instance of the Echidnas being big fat hypocrites, something that would, again, become a running theme for most of their tenure in the comic. I maintain that technology as a whole is a tool, it is neither good nor evil, it all depends on the wielder, which is why I gave the Echidnas hell for just up and abandoning all tech, or most tech as we'll see later, but then we're introduced to Haven, a place that is made specifically out of advanced technology to be used by the Guardians, and only by the Guardians. You see where I'm going with this, right? The whole tech purge was stupid to begin with, and fighting tech with tech is probably the smartest thing they could do, but it doesn't change the fact that the Guardians maintain that the tech purge was the right thing to do, even though it helped lead to the creation of the Dark Legion, and was something that could be casually ignored whenever the Guardians felt like it. The Guardians don't get to sit on their high horse when they can't even remain consistent with their own ideology. The time span is also pretty confusing, like it was in the flashbacks in the first issue, especially when it comes to Steppenwolf's training. What exactly was the Legion doing while he was buffing himself up exactly? I know they weren't sitting still, that's for sure. The main villain of the arc, Kragok, has also sort of not done anything. You notice that? I mean, he was introduced in the first issue, he knocked Knuckles around a bit and ordered a firebombing in this one, but other than being the leader of the obviously hostile forces, we don't really know what this guy's deal is. Well, I sort of know because I read ahead, but so far, apart from his design, he's not exactly been the most interesting villain. In terms of art, I don't really have a whole lot to add to what I said last time. It's once again Galan and Papoy on art duties, and they do the same great job that they did last time, but I will say, with their more prominent featuring in this issue, the designs of the ants kind of bother me. There's a reason why movies like A Bug's Life and Ants tended to design their characters without the use of mandibles, and here is why. They just look really, really weird on creatures that have a much more human-like mouth. With that being said, we're putting a close on issue 2 and moving on to Knuckles issue 3, where we'll be putting a close on this opening arc. I don't have a witty ending for this episode. See you all next time, everyone.